Oh my god, he's covering Dead Rising 2 off the record? I thought he was done with Dead Rising 4. Well, you thought wrong. Dead Rising 2 off the record to me is the better of the two Dead Rising 2 games. This game brought back Frank West as he tries to fight his way back up to the top because now he's lost everything, including his talk show. But in this game, a new investigation has sprouted up like a weed, and Frank must take them down. This game is an alternate version of Dead Rising 2, where instead of the hero being Chuck Green, we get to play as our boy, Frank West, or Hank East, if you know what I mean. But the story is pretty much the same, besides for maybe a few new story twists and turns throughout the game. This will be my last Dead Rising video until I make my timeline video. That's going to take a little bit of work to do though, and I might release that closer to the release date of the Dead Rising remake. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and go check out my other videos because I could really use the support on those. I am really trying to create a community that loves all things surrounding games, but with that being said, let's take a walk and let's talk about some Dead Rising 2 off the record. So, not much is really known about the development. It kind of starts off after the release of Dead Rising 2 being a massive success. The off-the-record executive producer, Jason Lee, explains, originally the plan was that we were going to do a director's cut of Dead Rising 2. Capcom has a long history of successful director cut games, especially with the Resident Evil series, and we wanted to bring that treatment to the Dead Rising franchise, but when Dead Rising 2 first announced, something strange happened. Fans of the franchise were excited for its return, and the development team was confident that players would click with the new game's hero, Chuck Green, but the feedback was clear. Many people felt that something was missing, and that something was Frank West. As fans asked, why did you take our hero away? What this did for us and for this product was to create an interesting opportunity. What if, instead of doing a director's cut, we re-envisioned the outbreak in Fortune City with Frank West as the hero? And I'm just paraphrasing what he said, and I 100% agree that a director's cut version of Dead Rising 2 probably wouldn't have hit as well as doing an off-the-record game with Frank West, because let's be real here. Frank West is the most iconic Dead Rising character. With trying to bring Frank back, it brings back a lot of questions for the developers. The developers thought, how would the story change? How would Frank react to certain things going on in the story? And what would bringing his camera back add to the game? While there's not a lot known about the development behind the scenes, we would see them add a lot of things to the game, including Uranus Zone, which was a cool little theme park with a bunch of sex jokes. The developers wanted to improve the gameplay mechanics that made the original Dead Rising 2 so much fun to play, and it would fix a lot of the issues that fans had with the original Dead Rising 2. And this just shows Capcom's commitment to making sure the fans could enjoy the franchise that they have played and enjoyed, and that has been enjoyed by so many people. So yeah, the marketing of this game was focused heavily on these new changes. They would add a bunch of new features to the game that would change the overall story of the OG Dead Rising 2. A lot of the OG Dead Rising 2 fans actually might be able to spot when certain things change in the plot, but we'll talk about that in the plot section, and then let me know if you spot out the changes. Well, actually, don't let me know, but you'll know when you spot out the changes. Most of the changes would include some of the psychopaths, like Adam the Clown's cousin who drives around an ice cream truck. They would add new survivors that you could save. And the survivor AI has been improved drastically, especially for when you go to tame Snowflake, the tiger that you can fight as a psychopath, which in Dead Rising 2 it was much harder to tame him, so in Off the Record they made it so much easier. They would also bring back Frank's camera feature, where you can take pictures to increase your leveling system, or the PP points that has always been a huge staple in the franchise. Another cool feature that was added was Sandbox Mode, which, if you remember playing Dead Rising 1, it's basically the same thing. You could fight survivors, bosses, pretty much use any vehicles you want, and just kill as many zombies as you want without a time limit, which I thought was really cool for them to add something like this. And in my opinion, this is something that they should have done with Dead Rising 4. They should have had a timer-based story, with obviously a better story than what we got, but also a sandbox mode in case you wanted to just explore and collect things. And they could have integrated that into the main progression system with the collectibles that you would get in this sandbox mode. But you guys already know that that didn't happen, nor will it ever happen with Dead Rising 4, which is very unfortunate. But like I said before, there were a lot of changes that took place for the story, and we're going to talk about that next in the plot section of the video. So for this, the game starts off with Frank taking part in Terra is Reality, which is hosted by TK, or Tyrone King. And after Frank leaves and collects his winnings, he goes to leave, and this is where he notices a member of Cure taking money from TK along with some explosives. Frank will follow this until being kicked out by TK's guards. After this, Frank will go down the elevator and find out that another zombie outbreak has started. And Frank will run through the hordes of zombies and make it to the safe room, where he is greeted by Sullivan, who, if you remember, he was the villain of Dead Rising 2. Who reminds him that he needs to go find Zombrex, and this brings him to the pharmacy. After getting the Zombrex and returning to the safe house, he comes back and watches the news report with Stacy Forsyth. If you remember her, she was also in Dead Rising 2. This will begin the investigation into the claims that Cure is responsible for the outbreak. He will meet up with an old friend, Rebecca Chang, and together they venture off to the arena to check out the video monitors that recorded Brandon arming the explosives, only to find that the security room has been ransacked with a dead end. Frank returns to the safe house after Stacy calls him saying that Sullivan is threatening to kick her out. Later, the two observe Brandon on the security monitors dragging a woman into the bathrooms at Uranus Zone. Frank heads over there to confront Brandon, only to witness Vicky get murdered and attacked by Brandon. After he defeats Brandon, Frank questions Stacy with the information he got out of Brandon. Stacy reassures Frank that Brandon was only a new recruit and he was probably working for TK. Spotting more people on the monitors, Frank investigates several men moving equipment underground. The men are goons working for TK, loading equipment onto a train under TK's orders. When Frank is spotted, TK takes off, obviously like the little bitch he is, and Frank manages to board the last minute. After defeating the mercenaries on board, he confronts TK only to have been shot at and separated as TK unlatches the locomotive from the rest of the cars. After returning to the safe house, the explosives are felt, and it turns out that TK is robbing the city's casinos. Frank stops the robberies and saves Rebecca from an explosion from the armored van outside of the Americana Casino. Brought back to the safe house, Rebecca explains that she has a meeting later with her source that night. When Frank goes to meet with Rebecca at the Americana Casino restaurant, it is revealed that Rebecca has been kidnapped by TK, and he demands $1 million in exchange for her life. After running around the city collecting money, Frank heads to the Skull nightclub where TK's bodyguards take the money and leaves Amber and Crystal Bailey to show up with the tied up Rebecca. The twins are eventually defeated as one of them is killed and the other commits suicide. Rebecca is saved again and is brought to the safe house once more. On the way out, Rebecca informs Frank that TK is planning to leave the city via helicopter and that it's going to land on the Fortune City Hotel rooftop. The pair make their way to the hotel and manage to cause TK's helicopter to crash, killing the pilot and the bodyguard, while TK is thrown out of the helicopter to the ground and then knocked unconscious. Now, locked up at the safe house, the survivors await a rescue. Frank and Rebecca go out on the streets to film and photograph the military rescue, only to witness it go horribly wrong, as gas is released and the soldiers are slaughtered. Frank spots Rebecca running from the streets as he goes after her. He finds out that Rebecca is underground in a parking lot beneath the Yucatan, casino, captured by a now crazy Sergeant Dwight Boykin. He is forced to battle the deranged commander in order to save Rebecca, who is once again brought back to the safe house, and the survivors discuss about what happened to the military. Rebecca says that the gas must have come from underground and that it mutated the zombies. This leaves Frank to go underground to investigate the origins of it. Sullivan warns that there will be another rescue attempt, but if it fails, a firebombing will be called in to eliminate the entire city. Now, before Frank can go investigate the underground gas, the safe house door gets breached, and Frank has to rewire it and fix it so that the zombies doesn't kill everybody inside. Once this is fixed, TK somehow gets out of his handcuffs and starts walking through the halls. This is when he gets bitten by a zombie, and like in the Dead Rising 2 game, this is a choice that you can make whether to give him Zombrex or not that'll influence one of the endings that you'll get for the game. But once you either give TK his Zombrex or you do whatever, Frank then has to go underground to investigate the Phenotrans facility. While Frank is underground, he finds out that a Phenotrans operation has been set up in which they have been using that to collect queens from the gas that has been used to quicken the harvesting process, as it mutates the zombies and forces out the queens after killing them. Frank defeats a number of mercenaries and kills Mark Bradson and Pierce Stevens, the two hostile Phenotrans scientists. He takes their computer and shows the evidence to Stacy, Sullivan, and Rebecca. Just as Rebecca was going to call her station for rescue, she is shot in the stomach by Stacy, who stole Sullivan's gun. Sullivan then takes a bullet to the chest and falls to the ground. Frank is about to be shot when Sullivan attacks her, only to be shot down twice, one more time killing him. Frank then tackles Stacy, but she manages to escape, though he was able to pull off her fake ponytail. Chasing her out of Fortune City Park, Frank finds several harvesters that have been deployed with Phenotrans mercenaries guarding them. He quickly kills the armed goons and destroys the harvesting equipment before facing Stacy in a final showdown at Uranus Zone. When he arrives, Stacy reveals that she is a Phenotrans agent going by the name of Agent S. They have a lengthy argument about the morals of outbreaks, and then she attacks him. She is able to destroy the machine she resides in, and he fights her in the machine's cockpit. She is thrown out of the cockpit, but drags Frank with her to the ground, where she beats him and retrieves her gun. She is about to shoot him when he rolls out of the way, and she is crushed to death by a falling machine. Frank returns to the safe house as Tamara Stein and Skylar Ollie, the last of the survivors, are ready to be evacuated. He asks about Rebecca and Sullivan's bodies being loaded, but the two don't know anything about it. Simon Bostwick calls to Frank, saying that they need to leave, but Frank refuses to leave without making sure the dead have been flown out of the city. The helicopter leaves and Frank heads to the office to find Sullivan still there, but Rebecca is missing. Only her press tag remains. This will lead the story into overtime mode. So for overtime, it'll show Frank standing alone inside of the safe house, and then Frank will finally get a call from TK telling him that Rebecca is alive and that if he wants to save her from her wounds, he has to go around the city to get supplies, along with items that TK wants. After getting the items and returning to the arena, Frank is knocked out by TK, where when he awakens in the arena, he is forced to survive against zombies during a Terror is Reality game, while TK watches from a catwalk. Rebecca will slowly crawl over to a rope and pushes it down to Frank, then pushes a button to make the rope pull up. Rebecca is then knocked out again as Frank grabs onto the rope and is brought up to the catwalk. Frank and TK will then fight, and soon TK will grab Frank and attempt to choke him and toss him over the edge of the catwalk. But instead, Frank flips TK over the platform and then he picks up Rebecca and they leave the arena together and with a zombie cutaway like the other Dead Rising game. But it wouldn't be a Dead Rising game without its endings, and most of these endings go as follows. The A ending is you defeat Stacy and give TK Zombrex. Another ending, if you do not give TK his Zombrex, when you head back to the safe house, he'll be there in the elevator as a zombie, and he will tackle Frank to the ground, and the helicopter will take off because of all the zombies that are swarming the area. And in another ending, Frank will get grabbed by the military. They explain that they're there to rescue him, but then the green gas will flood the area, and the helicopter ends up flying away, leaving Frank trapped. Another ending is if you don't defeat Stacy in time, a squadron of bombers will fly over the city, dropping bombs, killing everybody, and Stacy gets to escape. So, I don't know. These are all just the main endings for Off the Record. As you can tell, there's always multiple endings in Dead Rising games, except for maybe Dead Rising 4, but... And I'm sorry again for the lack of development information. There's really not a lot of information when it comes to Dead Rising games because it's kept quietly under wraps. But let's talk about the release of the game, followed by the fans' opinions, should you play in 2024, and then my final thoughts. So let's get into the timeline of events of the marketing and the release. So in April 2011 at a Capcom sponsored event, they announced the game, and following that in June 2011, they did a live stream where they showed off all of the new features that were going to be added into the game. Capcom would actually receive a lot of criticism about the release of the game, with many people claiming that they were doing this as a cash grab. And this was mainly because the game was taking place in the same setting as Dead Rising 2, which I feel was undeserved considering how great this game really turned out to be. The game would release October 13th, 2011 with very mixed reviews, with many people saying that Dead Rising Off the Record was really good if you're just getting into the franchise, but it's not worth the time and money if you've already spent a good amount of time playing the original Dead Rising 2. And I don't really agree with that. I mean, I understand where they're coming from when they say that, but I personally loved both Dead Rising 2 games, even though I had spent more time playing the original Dead Rising 2 than I did playing Off the Record. One of the main things I did like about Off the Record, though, was the sandbox mode, and I think that's probably one of the best options that this game has, and besides for the new combo weapons that the game released with. If you enjoyed playing Dead Rising 2, as I was one of those people, then you'll probably enjoy Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. It's still a lot of fun. And The sandbox mode is just like the infinite mode from Dead Rising 1, where all the survivors are hostile and you can even go and fight some of the psychopaths as well. Dead Rising 2 off the record would go on to sell 1.6 million copies, and this would give Capcom the push to start developing Dead Rising 3, just because of the overall love and support that the franchise had at the time. Eventually, they would also remaster the game for the Dead Rising Deluxe package that would release in 2016. That remaster came with a remaster of Dead Rising 1, 2, and Dead Rising 2 off the record, which would feature a lot of graphical upgrades, and the whole focus of the game was brought back just because of our boy TJ Rotolo. And that's probably the best thing they could have done for the fans, because this made them really happy, especially after getting Dead Rising 4, which replaced TJ Rotolo. And TJ Rotolo is probably Frank West, the best pick for Frank West, hands down. That's all I really have to say about that itself. I absolutely loved building the dildo weapon and firing it into the mouths of zombies, but that's besides the point. Let's get into why you should play this in 2024. So, when the question comes down to whether you should play in 2024, of course you should play this game in 2024. This was a game that I played when it released, and I had so much fun. The sandbox feature added so many memories for me and my friends, and to this day, this game is one of my favorite out of the two Dead Rising games, and it's an experience that I will never forget. So many believe that Dead Rising 2 has a much better story, which, that might be true, but I believe that Off the Record adds a lot more that the original Dead Rising 2 didn't have. And that's because whether they had time constraints or maybe they didn't think that people would enjoy those features, but as a veteran fan of the franchise, I believe that Off the Record has a little bit of everything for everybody, and that's why it's so perfect. And in my opinion, don't crucify me for this, but I believe that Dead Rising 2 Off the Record is the perfect mix between Dead Rising 3 and Dead Rising 1. This is how you make a Dead Rising game. You should have the ability to go off and do the story if you want to do the story with the timer, and you should have the ability to go off and do the sandbox mode, where you don't have the timer and you can just mindlessly kill zombies for fun. Even if you only enjoy Dead Rising 2, Dead Rising 2 Off the Record has a slight variation to its story, which will still make the game worth your while, and I think that should definitely count when considering whether you should play it or not. At the end of the day, whatever Dead Rising game you like will always fall under whatever your preference is. If you like the first game, then play the first game. If you enjoyed the second or the third, then play those. And for the few and the proud who enjoy the fourth game, then God bless you. You are doing God's work by killing those zombies. I am a huge fan of this franchise, regardless of anything else. I just have my thoughts on these games, and I don't want my opinions to reflect on whether you should like these games or not, because it's not up to me. It's your own personal opinions, and we'll always have opinions that vary. And I don't want to ever dissuade somebody from playing a game that they enjoy, just because that's not what I'm here for. I just really like Dead Rising, and I love making Dead Rising videos, and I just have so much passion for this franchise because, for me, I thought it was a franchise that has been long gone, and with the remake coming soon, I'm actually quite surprised with the amount of people that have come back and talked about this game. Dead Rising to me will always have a special place in my heart, and whether or not Dead Rising's remake is good or not, I think we should definitely keep an open mind when Capcom releases this game, because this might be the game that finally reignites the passion back into this franchise, and I think that's something that's worth waiting for. But those are just my thoughts. I have a short message I want to give to all of the people who watch and support my channel, so please stay tuned for that. So, to all of my supporters and the people that are consistently watching my videos, I really appreciate you guys. You guys have done such a great job in keeping me motivated when it comes to making these Dead Rising videos. And like I said before, this is going to be the last one that I'm going to be doing for a while. I do plan on making a Dead Rising timeline video, but that won't be until we get a little bit closer to August, or, maybe closer to the release date for the remake. Now, even though I won't be making Dead Rising videos, I do plan on making videos on other franchises, and I really hope that you guys will continue to watch those and really keep trying to support this channel. I plan on doing some Elder Scrolls, Dead Space, Outlast, Fallout 76. I mean, I have all kinds of plans for this channel, and I really hope that you guys stick around and support this, because this is something that I can't do without you guys. You guys are the reason why I am so inspired to continue to make these videos. I would eventually like to make a Discord where we can all chat and goof around, but that's something that I can't do until I get some more supporters that will help build the channel. You guys are seriously what makes these videos possible, and I just want to thank you all for watching my videos. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and maybe watch another one, because that's how the algorithm works. And if you enjoyed this, maybe it'll recommend it to somebody else who does too. Thank you guys all again for watching, and have a good night.